Alright guys. Oh shit, 130 hours? Ain't. Probably should restart my stream soon. Anyways, figured we'd take a break from all like the super depressing, draining news of the modern world and draining and shit. And just constant, death and negative shit with all the countries and what's going on here with the immigration and shit. Figured we'd take a break from that and look at the unsolved cases that are now solved. So let's get right into it and see what the flip is going on.
Sometimes it's nice to get the answers. So I've got 5 cases from BuzzFeed Unsolved that are now solved. Starting with the bizarre case of Eliza Lamb, who was found dead in the water tank on the roof of the Cecil Hotel in 2013.
I think I remember this case actually, where like that girl, they found her in like the water tank or some shit, and the only reason why they found her is because all the water that was coming from like the water drains, like the faucets were like all black and like putrefied and like smelled nasty, apparently, like nasty. So yeah, that's basically how they found her.
Left her home in British Columbia and took a trip to California in January 2013. She posted photos to social media and was seemingly in good spirits. She then checked into the Cecil Hotel near downtown Skid Row. She was initially given a shared room on the hotel's 5th floor. However, her roommates complained about certain odd behavior, so Eliza was moved to a room of her own after 2 days. Apparently, Eliza was leaving notes for her roommates that said go home and go away. She would also lock the door to the room and require a password for entry. During her stay at the Cecil Hotel, she would also make her way to a live taping of Conan in Burbank, but she was escorted out for disruptive behavior. Eliza contacted her parents daily while traveling up until about January 31st, 2013, the day she was scheduled to check out of the Cecil Hotel and leave for Santa Cruz. But when her parents didn't hear from her that day, they called the LAPD. Police searched the hotel to the extent that they legally could. They searched Eliza's room and had dogs go through the building, including the rooftop. The dogs were detecting scents, but they just couldn't find Eliza. Then about 2 weeks later, on February 13th, the LAPD released a video of the last known sighting of Eliza, taken in one of the Cecil's elevators. You've probably seen this video before, but in the 2.5 minutes that Eliza is seen in the elevator, she makes several weird gestures and movements. She appears to press every button on the elevator panel. She looks down the hallway, then leaves the elevator at one point while its doors remain open. When the doors fail to close after she returns, she leaves the elevator again. Now, this caused the internet to come up with theories that collectively lowered the average IQ of the human race, like demons were chasing her, or fucking ghosts, or she was playing the elevator game, which is some bullshit about an elevator taking you to a different dimension or something. But let's just come back to reality for a second. During the search for Lamb, guests at the hotel began complaining about low water pressure. Some said their water was colored black and had an unusual taste. So on the morning of February 19th, a hotel maintenance worker went up to the roof, and that's when he found...
If they're saying that there was an unusual taste, that means that they fucking drank it or probably mixed it with their food. Oh, that is so nasty, dude. They basically just had like Eric Cartman's Scott Timmerman chowder. That's so gross.
Found Eliza's body, floating face up in the water of one of the 4 1,000-gallon water tanks on the roof that provided water to the guest rooms, a kitchen, and a coffee shop. It has since been determined that Eliza was struggling with her mental health at the time. She was diagnosed with bipolar disorder, and she was under-medicating at the time of her death. She had similar episodes before, where she went missing and even got hospitalized. As for how she got onto the locked roof, it has been proven that she could have used the fire escape. The tracking dogs even tracked her scent to a window connecting to it. And as for how she got into the tank, when the hotel worker found her, he said that the tank lid was open and not closed with the heavy lid like many people claim. It's a really sad case, but it's solved, and the conclusion is she went in herself during an episode, and unfortunately, no one was around to help her. Next up is the Lady of the Dunes. On July 26, 1974, a 12-year-old...
Like, I'm just trying to think, like, how could your mind convince you to just go to the roof and throw yourself in the drain like that? Like, what? Like, was she seeing, like demons or some shit? Was somebody in her mind telling her to go in there or something, you know? Like, was she seeing, like, ghosts, and was she trying to hide it in there, thought it was, like, a good hiding spot or something? Like, I'm just confused, dude. Like, I I don't know what could possibly convince a person to go in there. Like, even with it, I don't know. I guess mental illness. Well, it's not. I guess I know mental illness is insane, dude. It makes you do crazy.
The girl
shit.
followed a barking dog to the decomposing body of an unidentified woman that was on a beach at the Race Point Dunes of Provincetown, Massachusetts. The crime scene was pretty graphic. Both of her hands had been severed, her teeth had been pulled out, and there was also a massive injury to her head, which crushed half of it. A blue bandana and a pair of Wrangler jeans were tucked underneath her head as she was laying on her back on a beach blanket. During the course of this mystery, her body was exhumed 4 different times in hopes to solve the case. And finally, on October 31st, 2022, the FBI announced that the victim had been identified as Ruth Marie Terry. There were quite a few suspects over the years, including a mobster named Whitey Bulger, who was known for removing his victims' teeth. There was also a serial killer operating in Massachusetts named Tony Costa, as well as a convicted murderer named Haddon Clark, who actually confessed to the murder, saying, quote, "I could have told the police what her name was, but after they beat the shit out of me, I wasn't gonna tell them shit." However, it was none of these losers. In fact, it was actually an even bigger one by the name of Guy Rockwell Muldoon. Now, I'm confident in saying that if Ruth's hands and teeth weren't removed, police would have solved this straight away. This guy was a person of interest to the police as early as 1950 already, and was suspected of killing a 28-year-old truck driver named Henry Lawrence Red Baird, as well as kidnapping his 17-year-old girlfriend, Barbara Jo Kelly. Baird's body was discovered face down on the beach near Table Bluff the morning following his disappearance. He was shot in the back of the head. He only had socks and shoes on, and nearby, Barbara's clothes were found carefully folded and tucked underneath Baird's. No trace of Barbara herself could be found, and she has never been seen or heard from since. It is thought that whoever shot Baird had kidnapped her. Then on April 1st, 1960, Muldoon's second wife, Manzanita Ryan, as well as her daughter from a previous marriage named Dolores, both mysteriously disappeared while they were living in Seattle. Investigators found dismembered human body parts in Muldoon's septic tank, but were unable to prove that they were from either of the missing women. Muldoon then fled Seattle, but was arrested by the FBI and charged with unlawful flight to avoid giving testimony into their deaths. Interestingly, he was never charged for anything since the King County prosecutor was reluctant to do so without a body. Now, after the Lady of the Dunes was identified, the police discovered that Ruth Marie Terry had actually been married to, you guessed it, Guy Rockwell Muldoon. The couple got married sometime in 1973 or 1974 and were busy traveling for their honeymoon after the wedding. But when Muldoon came back home without Ruth and he was driving her car, witnesses at the time said Muldoon indicated to them that Ruth had died. But when Ruth's brother tried to find out more, Muldoon apparently just told him that he had a fight with her during the honeymoon and he never heard from her again. Muldoon then moved to Chihuahua, California, to a small community near Salinas around 19...
You can't be doing that, dude. You can't be telling mixed stories. You gotta stick to one story, because then the people are gonna know you're lying. Like, what? This guy's
76.
not smart.
He would then retire in 1985 from his job as an executive vice president of a silver store on Rodeo Drive, Beverly Hills, and die of a lengthy illness in Salinas, California on March 14, 2002. So despite all the awful things he did, he seems to have undeservedly lived a nice life. But then on August 28, 2023, Guy Rockwell Muldoon was officially named Ruth Marie Terry's killer. Next up is the Forrest Fenn treasure, which was a cache of gold and jewels that Forrest Fenn, an art dealer and author from Santa Fe, New Mexico, hid in the Rocky Mountains of the United States. The value of the chest was estimated to be as high as $2 million. He wrote a poem to act as a clue, which led tens of thousands of people to the Rocky Mountains in search of riches and adventure. Pretty awesome, until people started dying. Sadly, 5 people died while searching for the treasure. Randy Bilyeu was first and went missing in January 2016 and was found dead in July. His body was discovered by workers along the Rio Grande, and an autopsy could not determine his cause of death. His ex-wife publicly stated her belief that the Fenn treasure was a hoax. Jeff Murphy from Illinois was second and was found dead on June 9, 2017 in Yellowstone National Park after falling about 500 feet down a steep slope. Later that same year, the third victim, Pastor Paris Wallace of Grand Junction, Colorado, was found about 5 to 7 miles downstream along the Rio Grande. after telling his family he was gonna go out and find the treasure. The fourth victim was Eric Ashby, who moved to Colorado to search for the treasure full-time and was found in the Arkansas River on July 28, 2017. And the fifth and final victim, Michael Wayne Sexton, was found dead by rescuers on March 21, 2020, alongside his companion Stephen Inlow, who later recovered in hospital. The pair were discovered within 5 miles of a site that they had been rescued from a month earlier, near the Dinosaur National Monument along the Utah-Colorado border. So this led the chief of the New Mexico Police to publicly implore Fenn to end the treasure hunt, stating he's putting lives at risk. While one dude stepped up to put an end to the hunt once and for all by actually finding it. On June 6, 2020, Fenn posted on the searcher blog Thrill of the Chase that the treasure had finally been found, saying, quote, "It was under a canopy of stars in the lush forested vegetation of the Rocky Mountains and had not moved from that spot where I hid it more than 10 years ago. I do not know the person who found it, but the poem in my book led them to the precise spot. I congratulate the thousands of people who participated in the search and hope they will continue to be drawn by the promise of other discoveries. So the search is over." Now, the identity of the finder, the photograph of the goods, and the location of the treasure were not revealed at the time, but on July 22nd, Fenn stated on the Thrill of the Chase blog that the treasure's finder had authorized him to disclose the location in the interest of closure for its many searchers. The treasure had been hidden in Wyoming. However, in December 2020, Jack Stoof, a medical student from Michigan, and who actually used to be one of the writers of BuzzFeed Unsolved. So good for him. I mean, he was probably inspired by the episode they did on it to go out and find it. But he came out and revealed that he was the one who found it and went public with his identity by doing an interview. Due to safety reasons, he would have preferred to stay anonymous, but a lawsuit was expected to reveal his identity anyway. Now, I'm not entirely sure what lawsuit he's referring to, and full disclaimer, I could be wrong about this, but I think it might have something to do with a French treasure hunter Karen who filed a $10 million lawsuit against Fenn's estate in July 2021. According to Karen, he had determined that the treasure was hidden in southwestern Colorado. He then informed Fenn of his solution and began making preparations to retrieve it. However, COVID happened and he couldn't go out and search for it. And then Fenn announced soon afterwards that the treasure had been found in Wyoming. Karen claimed that Fenn took advantage of the delay to move the chest from Colorado to Wyoming, using the point that its exact final location had not been specified by Jack Stoof or any of Fenn's relatives. Unsurprisingly, this lawsuit was dismissed. Karen then tried to file another one and reopen it, but they said no.
Listen, fuck up, get out!
The collar bomb incident. On August 28, 2003, pizza delivery man Brian Douglas Wells.
Wait. So they're just gonna gloss over all those people that fucking died? They're not gonna investigate how they died? Like, they just chalked it up to nature? They didn't even think it was suspicious that all these people just died by the river? Like, I would understand, if, one person fell to their death, somebody drowned, another person died of hypothermia, and they just found their body, but they just all mysteriously, coincidentally, all were found by the river. That didn't alarm anybody? Okay.
Entered a PNC Bank in Erie, Pennsylvania. He then starts waiting in the queue to get to the teller. About 8 minutes later, a witness inside the bank calls 911, saying there's a guy in the bank wearing a bomb or something around his neck. When Wells finally gets to the counter, he slides a note over to the teller. The note says that the bomb...
Yeah, and it's like some old fucking chick, and she's like a crackhead, and she made him do it and say that it was black people, but it actually wasn't.
...will explode in 15 minutes unless $250,000 was handed over within that time. As the teller runs off to get the money, Wells waits at the counter, sucking on a lollipop. When the teller came back, she handed him a bag of money, which only had $8,702 in it because she was unable to access the vault that quickly. According to the witnesses, as Wells left the bank, he swung his cane gun and the bag of money around like Charlie Chaplin. Around 15 minutes later, after Wells left the bank, police saw him standing outside his car and quickly handcuffed him and left him sitting on the pavement in the parking lot. Wells said that 3 unnamed black people placed a collar bomb around his neck, provided him with the gun, and told him they would kill him unless he committed the robbery and completed several other tasks. This was seemingly confirmed when police found 9 pages of handwritten instructions addressed to bomb hostage, directing Wells to rob the bank. The instructions also included a scavenger hunt, listing a series of strictly timed tasks of collecting keys that would delay the detonation and eventually defuse the bomb. The pages also said that Wells would be under constant surveillance and any attempts to contact authorities would result in the bomb's detonation, saying, quote, "Act now, think later, or you will die." Now, the police didn't attempt to disarm the bomb at the time, but they instead focused on clearing the immediate area of pedestrians and ensuring that Wells could not detonate the device. The bomb squad would only be called at 3:04 p.m., about 10 minutes after Wells was cuffed, and then at 3:18 p.m., 3 minutes before the bomb squad arrived, the bomb detonated and blasted a fist-sized hole in Wells's chest. He would die almost instantly. The reason the bomb squad was held back was bad traffic. This is like a real-life version of Saw. Though the note claimed that Wells could gain extra time by each key found, police later traveled the note's route and couldn't complete it in the allotted time, implying that Wells would not have had enough time to get the bomb defused, so he was literally a dead man walking. Now, it's not clear if Wells was in on it, but if you're gonna suck on a fucking lollipop while you've got a bomb around your neck and swing a bag of money like Charlie Chaplin, then there's not much anyone can say to help your case. Well, the police tried to retrace his steps anyway, which would pretty much lead them nowhere, but almost a month later, a 911 call would come from William Rothstein saying, quote, "At 8645 Peach Street, in the garage, there is a frozen body. It's in the freezer." He was referring to his own address. Within hours of making the call, he was in custody. He told the cops that he had considered killing himself and had gone so far as to write a suicide note, which investigators found in a desk at his home. Writing in black marker, he apologized to those who cared about him and identified the body in the freezer as Jim Roden and noted that he did not kill him nor participate in his death. However, the note opened with a very, very interesting disclaimer. This has nothing to do with the Wells case. Rothstein then explained to police that in mid-August, he'd received a phone call from an ex-girlfriend, Marjorie Deal Armstrong, who he had dated in the 60s and early 70s. Marjorie said that she had shot her live-in boyfriend, James Roden, in the back with a Remington 12-bore shotgun in a dispute over money, and now she needed help removing the body and cleaning up the scene. She would pay Rothstein $2,000 for his assistance.
Dude,
Marjorie was then arrested.
This woman is literally like a super villain, dude. She's like freaking like the what's it called? The Golden Age Joker, like the psychotic gangster. Like she's just in bad shit, crazy, dude. Correct.
And later in 2005, she told a state trooper that she had information about the Wells case, and after meeting with FBI agents, she said she would tell them everything if she was transferred from the Muncie Correctional Institution to a minimum security prison in Cambridge Springs. Then during a series of interviews, Marjorie admitted to providing the kitchen timers used for the bombs, and she stated that Rothstein masterminded the entire plot and that Wells had been directly involved in the plan. However, it turned out that Rothstein, Marjorie, and her fishing buddy Kenneth Barnes were discussing ways that they could make money. Marjorie suggested that Kenneth Barnes should kill her father, Harold Deal, so she would receive her inheritance. Barnes told her that he was only willing to do this for $250,000, and so the collar bomb bank robbery plot was born. According to Marjorie and the police reports, Wells is believed to be involved in the planning of the bank robbery the day before and was aware of the complex plot. He believed the bomb would have been fake, but would serve as exculpatory evidence if he were caught. According to an FBI affidavit, 2 witnesses came forward and confirmed that Wells had spoken about the robbery a month before it occurred. Wells was also seen leaving Rothstein's house the day before the incident, and
so
investigators believe that he participated in a rehearsal. It was also believed that Wells was killed to reduce the number of witnesses. However, Jessica Hoopsick, a woman who was Wells's friend, confessed in the Netflix documentary Evil Genius that she set Wells up to participate in the crime by providing his name and delivery schedule to one of the conspirators in exchange for money and drugs. She claims that he had no knowledge of the robbery. Now, I don't know, I can't see why she would lie about that unless Netflix paid her to. I mean, Brian Wells is gone and he cannot come out and defend himself, so why would Hoopsie come out and admit that? Maybe because it's true. And Wells was what she described him as, a gopher. And our last one for today is the murder of Tupac Shakur. On September 7th, 1996, Tupac was shot in a drive-by shooting on the Vegas Strip. The driver, Marion Suge Knight, was only hit by bullet fragments, but Tupac was struck 4 times and died from his injuries 6 days later. A Crips gang member named Orlando Baby Lane Anderson became a prime suspect, but denied being involved and was never charged. Then Orlando himself would also be killed in an unrelated gang shootout in 1998. Then 6 months later, Christopher Wallace, better known as Biggie Smalls, was also shot and killed in a drive-by shooting in Los Angeles. Biggie's case became just as bizarre as Tupac's, sparking all kinds of conspiracy theories, leading Voletta Wallace, Biggie's mother, to file a $400 million lawsuit against the LAPD, accusing rogue cops of killing her son. The lawsuit threatened to bankrupt the police department, with Voletta stating that it had nothing to do with dollars and cents. It had to do with honesty, integrity, and a cover-up. So after 4 years of courtroom battles, the LAPD decided that the best way to prove that the police hadn't killed Biggie was to figure out who actually did. So in the spring of 2006, Greg Kading, the detective that solved Tupac's case, got a call from an LAPD detective asking him to join a resurrected investigation into Biggie's death. Right, so that's how this started, and the information I'm presenting here comes directly from Greg Kading, and I'm going to paraphrase it, but I've linked the interview with him in the description. After about a year had passed and the task force exhausted almost all of their leads and had almost nothing to show for it, they agreed there was one more target left to pursue: Dwayne Kef D. Davis. If this name sounds familiar, that's because as far back as 1998, Davis has been saying that he was a front seat passenger in the car that killed Tupac. But whenever he was asked who pulled the trigger, Davis replied, quote, "Gonna keep it for the code of the streets. It just came from the back seat, bro." Davis was a high-ranking gang member whose name was all over the case file, from chatting Biggie up backstage at the Peterson Museum on the night of his death to his presence in Las Vegas on the night Tupac was killed. Now, Davis was living a damn good life in Southern California, raking in millions of dollars every year running a drug trafficking network that was directly supplied by the Colombian cartels, so getting him to talk to the police wouldn't be easy. So for that, they needed leverage. Greg Kading devised a plan to develop a strong enough drug case against Davis that he would be willing to divulge whatever he knew about Biggie's murder in exchange for a deal. Kading and his team started by buying kilos of coke from Davis through a Southside Crip informant who had done deals with Davis before. After a wiretap caught Davis saying to a drug trafficker in Texas that he also sold water, slang for PCP, they started buying that too. Now, getting caught selling a single-gallon jug was probably enough to put Davis away for the rest of his life. And according to Kading, Davis had said, quote, "Man, I can fill your swimming pool." In late 2008, Kading and another detective on the task force confronted Davis at his home in Southern California, and they explained to him the really bad situation he was in. Sitting in his garage so curious neighbors wouldn't be alarmed, they told him that he was looking at 20+ years in prison on drug charges, and not to mention harsh sentences for numerous family members and friends who had been swept up in the sting. That is, unless he wanted to talk about Biggie and Tupac. Within the next hour, Davis's lawyer called and scheduled a meeting. Now, in an effort to extract the truth, Davis was offered a proffer agreement, meaning whatever Davis told them that day wouldn't be used against him, so he was able to speak freely, and in exchange, Davis could get potential leniency for the drug charges. Now, there was only one problem. Davis claimed that he didn't know anything about Biggie's murder, but for some reason, meetings kept getting scheduled, and Davis kept showing up for them. Then a few weeks later, in early 2009, Davis said, quote, "I don't know nothing about what you want to talk to me for, but what I do know is gonna blow your fucking mind." And here we go. Back in 1991, Davis met the famed East Coast drug dealer and club owner named Eric Von Zip Martin. Zip was a hustler who, according to Mike Tyson, once stole $600,000 of cash from a boxing promoter. I'm going to hell. Zip and Davis then formed a bond built mostly on cross-country drug deals, which eventually led to an introduction to another of Zip's associates, Bad Boy Records founder Sean Diddy Combs. With Biggie's profile rising, Diddy and his star artists were spending an increasing amount of time on the West Coast, just as the rivalry between Bad Boy and Suge Knight's Death Row Records was heating up. At the 1995 Source Awards in New York, Suge Knight had openly mocked Diddy in front of a packed audience. A year later, Biggie and Tupac had come face to face in a standoff outside the Soul Train Awards in Los Angeles, during which Tupac implored Reggie Wright Jr., the head of Death Row Security, to quote, "Shoot him, Reg, shoot him." Davis then offered Diddy his Crip soldiers as security during his West Coast tours. But as is tradition with Diddy, he took the relationship one step further. During a stop on the 1995 Summer Jam tour in Anaheim, Diddy allegedly told a hotel room full of Crip gangsters,
I feel like we already knew though that it was Diddy, like this whole time. Even without you telling me that it's Diddy, I already knew that it was Diddy. I mean, this is the same guy who blew up Kid Cudi's car. Or lit it on fire, whatever, same shit.
Davis included that he wanted, quote, "them dudes' heads." As Davis put it, Diddy wanted them to kill Tupac and Suge Knight. Now fair enough, he may have simply been caught up in the moment. Tensions were high and he was by all accounts legitimately concerned for his safety. But at the same time, it's Diddy. And he even offered $1 million to get the hit done. And Davis confessed that he agreed, saying we'll wipe their asses out quick. Detective Greg Kading then asked Davis to clarify, was Tupac's killing a murder for hire? But Davis replied, no. And now we finally found out why Tupac was murdered. Tupac was in Vegas to attend the Mike Tyson boxing match at the MGM Grand Hotel, an event that Davis and his nephew, Orlando Anderson, also attended. After the fight, Anderson was alone in the lobby of the casino next to the hotel when Trevin Lane, a blood gangster known for his connections to Suge Knight, recognized Anderson as the Crip who had tried to steal his diamond-studded death row necklace. Apparently, Diddy also offered a bounty to anyone who could bring him one of those chains. Lane pointed Anderson out to Tupac, and Tupac rushed across the floor and asked Anderson, "You from the South?" He then punched Anderson in the face, dropping him to the floor, where he then had the shit beaten out of him by the death row entourage, including Suge Knight. The security footage of that night shows Tupac and Knight attacking Anderson. Meanwhile, Davis was sitting in a nearby restaurant, and when word got back that his nephew had been attacked, he quickly planned his revenge on Tupac and Suge Knight. He wrote in his 2019 memoir, quote, "The shit became ominously personal." But because the visit to Vegas had been strictly social, Davis and his crew hadn't brought any guns with them. And this is where Zip comes back into the story. He also came to Vegas for the fight and offered a .40 caliber Glock to Davis that he had hidden in a secret compartment in his Mercedes-Benz. For the next hour and a half, two cars of Crips staked out Club 662, a Suge Knight-owned venue where Tupac was meant to perform, but Tupac and Knight never showed. After waiting a while, one of the cars headed out, leaving 4 people behind in a white Cadillac. The 4 people inside the Cadillac were Terrence Bubble Up Brown, the driver, Dwayne Kef D. Davis in the front passenger seat, DeAndre Big Dre Smith in the back seat, and Orlando Anderson. After waiting a while without Tupac and Knight showing up, they drove back towards the Vegas Strip, driving along East Flamingo Road. Just after 11 p.m., Davis spotted Tupac up on the street, near the intersection with Covell Lane, leaning out of the passenger side window of a black BMW that was being driven by Suge Knight. Tupac sat out of the window and started chatting up some girls in a passing car, then Bubble Up hit the gas, sliding the car into the far right lane, while Davis handed the Glock to Anderson in the back seat. As both cars slowed at the corner, Anderson reached across Big Dre and fired out of the open window, hitting Tupac 4 times, 2 in the chest, 1 in the arm, and 1 in the thigh. He would die 6 days later in hospital. Suge Knight, however, was only hit in the head by bullet fragments. Now, not only had Davis detailed the events behind Tupac's shooting and confessed to his own involvement in it, but he also laid out at least part of the blame for the murder on Sean Diddy Combs. Davis claimed that soon after the shooting, Diddy called Zip to ask, "Was that us?" Davis confirmed that it was, and despite the personal nature of the killing, he still wanted his $1 million bounty. Davis never got the $1 million though, and Diddy has repeatedly denied that this happened, calling Davis's claims nonsense. But no one really believes Diddy, because he's fucking Diddy. But at least we do finally know who shot Tupac and why. Then on September 29th, 2023, Dwayne Kef D. Davis was arrested in connection for Tupac Shakur's murder, being identified as the leader of the group and the mastermind of an intent to murder, and the 27-year-old mystery was finally solved. The murder of Biggie Smalls, however, still remains unsolved, but according to Greg Kading and his colleagues, the leading theory is that a woman named Tammy Hawkins was a potential conspirator in Biggie's murder. Tammy Hawkins is the mother of one of Suge Knight's children and had been involved in a number of criminal fronts on Knight's behalf. When she was faced with jail time and the threat of losing custody of her child, Hawkins claimed that in 1997, Suge Knight enlisted her to act as a go-between in arranging a hit on Biggie in retaliation for Tupac's murder. According to Hawkins, the shooter was a guy named Wardell Poochie Faust, a Bloods gang member who died in 2003 after being shot 10 times in the back while riding his motorbike in Compton. Poochie was apparently fucking crazy, and police once investigated him for unloading his gun on the car of a family driving past his house. But of course, due to lawsuits and sketchy police work, the task force got shut down, and without further corroboration, there will always be
go home or go to Stop and Shop, go down the street, if your car just gets lit up by some freak.
doubt if this is true. Well, it does feel good to finally get closure on some of these mysteries, and if you're up for it, I've got a 6th BuzzFeed mystery that's also now potentially solved. Check out the video I did on the Axeman of New Orleans, because I'm pretty sure I've solved it. As always, if there's anything you want to add to this video, leave.
Where's the Axeman of New Orleans?
Your thoughts and comments down below. Like the video, subscribe to the channel, and we'll see you again soon with another unsolved mystery. Thanks for watching.
Unsolved Chingazo. The Axeman of New Orleans.
Between May 1918 and October 1919, New Orleans was in a frenzied panic about a roaming serial killer, so much so that the killer was able to scare everyone in the city into playing jazz music in their homes, bars, and dance halls to save themselves from the wrath of the Axeman of New Orleans. Over 100 years later, we still have no idea who the Axeman was, what he wanted, or why he almost exclusively targeted Italian American grocers. However, there is a theory that the Axeman might have actually been a mafia hitman. If you like unsolved mysteries, that's all I do on this channel, so please like and subscribe for more videos like this one. Now, there are a lot of theories about the Axeman murders, from mafia turf wars to black hand crimes to the grocers themselves killing each other to get ahead in the competition, to a plain old spree killer, to a dodgy jazz business owner using the threat of death to save his struggling business. The fact is, nobody knows, but when you connect the dots, there is one name that keeps coming up over and over, and that name is Joseph Monfray, who was known around town by his real name, Frank Doc Mumphrey. Frank was a pharmacist by profession, but he also ran a struggling jazz business on the side, and he also led a dodgy double life. Frank is known to have used the alias Leon Joseph Monfray. Now, I'll admit right now that I cannot find out specifically why he used it. However, there is evidence that links a Joseph Monfray to criminal activity in New Orleans during this time period, mainly proven through arrests, suspicion from police, and several terms in prison. Many suspect that the Axeman murders were linked with the mafia due to the vast majority of the victims in the story being of the same demographic, that being Italian American grocers. Now, something that's quite interesting about New Orleans is that it was the first city in the United States to have a mafia family of its own. Its links with the Sicilian Society go back to at least 1879. An early 20th century mafiosa in both New York and New Orleans used grocery stores as fronts for racketeering and extortion. Therefore, it is speculated that most of the attacks on the Italian American grocers attributed to the Axeman of New Orleans were actually just byproducts of small wars fought between the mafioso of the city. So it's important to mention that a Joseph Monfray was suspected by the police of being connected to the 1907 Lamanna kidnapping, a noted mafia crime, and was believed to be an associate of Vito Di Giorgio, who was an Italian-born crime boss based in Los Angeles, but he lived most of his life as a grocer in New Orleans. And this Joseph Monfray was considered by many of the locals to be an intermediary between Di Giorgio and his extortion victims. In addition to being believed to be involved with this mafia kidnapping, Joseph Monfray was, as a matter of fact, arrested for dynamiting the grocery store of Italian-American immigrant Charles Graffagnino in 1908. While he was awaiting sentencing, the first in the series of grocer killings began, and with that, The Mafia turf war was now in full swing, and this is when shit hits the fan. On March 12, 1910, a mafioso named Paul Di Cristina attempted to murder the city's then boss Vincenzo Morisi. The attempt was unsuccessful and Morisi survived, albeit with extensive wounds. Unsurprisingly though, a month later, Paul Di Cristina himself would be turned into a Jackson Pollock painting after getting shot by a shotgun while attacking a grocery store. The owner of the store and the man who killed him was Pietro Peter Pepitone. Pepitone then gets sent to jail for murder, even though he was just defending himself. Paul Di Cristina's murder was followed by several others involving Italian grocers. On July 13, 1910, a man demanding money shot and killed Joseph Manzella, who owned a grocery store and a saloon. Manzella's 17-year-old daughter then grabbed her father's gun and shot and killed the gunman, Giuseppe Spinazio. Police discovered that Manzella had received several Black Hand letters prior to his death. Now, Black Hand crime was a name given to an extortion method used in Italian neighborhoods at this time. Next was a grocer named Joseph Davy, who was beaten to death and his wife severely wounded. While an investigator was looking into the murders, he was warned to stop or face serious harm to himself. The next attack then happened on May 8, 1912, leaving grocer Anthony Jenner dead, and then another attack on the Ciambras on May 16th, 1 week later. Anthony Ciambra and his wife Johanna were shot in their lower 9th Ward home during the early morning hours. Johanna, who was often referred to as Mrs. Tony, survived. Her account of the events was released by the press, where the prime suspect is referred to numerous times by the name of Momfrey. Not quite the same as Monfrey, but it's suspiciously close. And while this attack was radically different from the Axeman's MO between 1918 and 1919, for example, he shot them, he didn't axe them. If Joseph Monfrey or Frank Doc Mumfrey was indeed the Axeman, or at least one of the Axemen, the Ciambras and some of these early victims may very well have all been early victims of the Axeman, and could potentially be the clue we need to make a compelling theory. Since all the victims share one thing in common, that being that they're all Italian-American grocers, we can assume that all of these attacks are part of the same thing. But since two of the attackers or hitmen have since been killed, here comes the third one in the form of Joseph Monfrey. Shortly after this, Joseph Monfrey's trial for dynamiting the grocery store began. He was given 20 years in prison. However, he served only 2. After his release in 1915, he and his associate, Angelo Albano, an important name to remember in the story, were picked up for questioning by New Orleans police after Vincenzo Morisi was finally gunned down successfully by 3 assassins on the street. Joseph Monfrey was then detained as a dangerous and suspicious character until further investigation, but it seems he was cleared of suspicion, and he was released in 1918 when the official series of Axeman killings began, or as my investigation implies, continued. And now we get to the first canonical victims of the Axeman. On May 23, 1918, Joseph Maggio, an Italian grocer, and his wife Catherine were attacked while sleeping inside their apartment on the corner of Upper Line and Magnolia Streets. The Axeman broke into their home and cut the couple's throats with a straight razor. Catherine's throat was cut so deeply that her head was nearly severed from her shoulders. The killer then struck both victims with an axe, perhaps in order to conceal the cause of death. Joseph, though, miraculously survived, only to die minutes after being discovered by his brothers Jake and Andrew. Police then found what, in my opinion, is the biggest clue connecting the early attacks to the 1918 attacks. Outside a few blocks from the murder scene, police found a cryptic message chalked on the sidewalk. It read, quote, "Mrs. Maggio is going to sit up tonight, just like Mrs. Tony." This message on the sidewalk is theorized to be a reference to Anthony and Johanna Ciambra, or Mrs. Tony as she was often referred to. Police then found the bloody clothes of the murderer in the apartment. Apparently, he changed into a clean set of clothes before fleeing the scene. And then for some reason, a complete search of the premises was not performed after the bodies were removed, but they ruled out robbery as a motive because all the money and valuables out in plain sight were not stolen by the Axeman. But the blood-stained razor used as the murder weapon was later found on the lawn of a neighboring property. The razor was found to belong to Joseph Maggio's own brother Andrew, who worked at a barbershop on Camp Street. His employee Esteban Torres, told police that Andrew removed the razor from the shop 2 days prior to the murder because he wanted to have a nick honed from the blade. Now, Andrew lived in the adjoining apartment to his brother and told police that he only heard groaning through the wall on the night of the murders and blamed his failure to hear any noise related to the attack itself on his intoxicated condition. Even though he was pissed out of his mind, the police were surprised that he failed to hear the intruders' forced entry into the home, and so Andrew Maggio became the police's prime suspect in his brother's own murder, but was released after investigators were unable to break down his statement, as well as his account of an unknown man who was supposedly seen lurking near the apartment prior to the murders. Then about a month later, during the early morning hours of June 27, 1918, grocers Louis Bessemer and his mistress Harriet Lowe were at.
And you know why they find it so hard to believe, Chad? Because it's not 2025, you know? It's not like he has like a computer where he could just have some shit playing in the background, or you have a TV, or there's cars everywhere, you know, making a bunch of noise. You know, there's actually like a bunch of noise that you could, I guess, say that you didn't hear it. Dude, it's like 1918. It's like fucking quiet as shit. You could hear like a pencil fucking drop. Like as soon as it reaches nighttime and everybody goes home, you could hear like a fart down the street.
Attacked in their private quarters at the back of the Bessemer's grocery store. Bessemer was struck with a hatchet above his right temple, which resulted in a skull fracture. Lowe was hacked over the left ear and left with one side of her face permanently paralyzed. The couple were discovered the following morning, alive but critically injured, by a bakery wagon driver named John Zanker, who came to the grocery to make a routine delivery. The hatchet used in the attack, which had belonged to Bessemer himself, was found in an adjacent bathroom. Bessemer told investigators that he had been sleeping while he was attacked. In classic police fashion, they immediately arrested Louis Obicon, a 41-year-old African-American man who had been employed in the grocery just a week before the attack. No evidence existed which could have proved Obicon was guilty, but they arrested him anyway, stating that he had offered conflicting accounts of his whereabouts on the morning of the attacks. Obicon was later released, however, because police were unable to gather sufficient evidence to hold him. Harriet Lowe recalled her assailant having been a mulatto man, meaning he had mixed African and European ancestry, yet her statement was discounted by police due to her disorientated state. This time, police said that robbery was the only possible explanation for the attacks, despite the fact that just like in the previous attack, no money or valuables were taken. After this, Harriet Lowe became the center of a media circus as she continually made scandalous and often false statements relating to both the attack and the character of Louis Bessemer. After Bessemer fell under suspicion of espionage because of the discovery of foreign written letters in his possession, Harriet Lowe told police that she thought he was a German spy, resulting in his immediate arrest. He would also be released 2 days later because of a lack of evidence. Then later in August 1918, Bessemer was arrested again after Lowe, who was now on her deathbed following failed surgery, named him as the killer. Bessemer was charged with murder and served 9 months in prison before finally being acquitted on May 1st, 1919, after just a 10-minute jury deliberation. Yeah, I don't think it takes a rocket scientist to figure out that the chances that Bessemer would headbutt a hatchet to cover his tracks are almost zero. Then during the early morning hours of August 5th, 1918, 28-year-old Anna Schneider, who was 8 months pregnant at the time, woke up to find a dark figure standing over her, and she was bashed in the face repeatedly. Her scalp was cut open, and her face was covered in blood. But Anna was discovered alive after midnight by her husband, Ed Schneider, as he returned home late from work. And fortunately, she still gave birth to a healthy baby girl 2 days later. Anna would say that the last thing she remembered was an axe descending down onto her head, and Ed would tell police that nothing was stolen from their home besides about $6 or $7 that had been inside his wallet. Police noted that the windows and doors of the couple's apartment didn't appear to be forced open, and they came to the conclusion that Anna was most likely attacked with a lamp that had been on a nearby table. This led them to publicly speculate that the attack was related to the previous Bessemer Maggio incidents, because the killer, using his victims' objects as murder weapons, was a big part of his MO. However, the one thing that didn't add up is the attack on Schneider represented a slight change in the Axeman's preferred targets. She was neither Italian nor a grocer. Therefore, it now seemed as if anyone in the city was fair game, and New Orleans really started to fear that some kind of boogeyman was on the loose in their city, and the Axeman didn't wait long to strike again. Just 5 days later, on August 10th, 1918, Pauline and Mary Bruno woke up to the sound of a commotion in the adjoining room where their elderly uncle, an Italian grocer, Joseph Romano, lived. They rushed into the room and discovered that Romano had taken a serious blow to his head, which resulted in 2 massive cuts. The killer was in the middle of fleeing the scene as they arrived, yet the girls were able to distinguish that he was a dark-skinned, heavy-set man who wore a dark suit and a slouched hat. Romano was able to walk himself to the ambulance once it arrived, yet he died 2 days later due to severe head trauma. His home had been ransacked, yet again, no items were stolen. Authorities found a bloody axe in the backyard and discovered that a panel on the back door had been chiseled away. Now, this is the murder that created a state of extreme chaos in New Orleans, with residents living in constant fear of an Axeman attack. Police received a slew of reports in which citizens claimed to have seen the killer lurking in local neighborhoods. A few men even called to report that they had found axes in their backyards. John D'Antonio, a then-retired Italian detective, made public statements in which he hypothesized that the man who had committed the recent murders was the same man who had killed several individuals in 1911, i.e. Joseph Momfrey, and D'Antonio described the potential killer as an individual with dual personalities and killed without motive. He said this type of individual could very likely have been a normal law-abiding citizen who was often overcome by an overwhelming desire to kill. He later went on to describe the killer as a real-life Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde. Then on the night of March 10th, 1919, Italian immigrants and grocers Charles Cortimiglia and his wife Rosie and his infant daughter Mary were attacked inside their residence on the corner of Jefferson Avenue and 2nd Street. This was perhaps the Axeman's worst attack yet. Rosie Cortimiglia awoke to the sight of her husband Charles fighting off the Axeman. It was a fight that he would ultimately lose. The Axeman would then turn his attention to Rosie, who was cradling her 2-year-old daughter Mary in her arms. As the axe came down upon them both, it killed the child instantly. After hearing screaming coming from the Cortimiglia residence, grocer Eolando Giordano alerted the police and rushed across the street to investigate. Charles and Rosie had both suffered fractured skulls from blows caused by the axe, which was found on their back porch. Nothing was stolen from their home, but a panel on the back door had again been chiseled away. Charles was released just after 2 days in hospital, while his wife remained in the care of doctors a little longer. Upon gaining full consciousness, Rosie claimed that Giordano and his 18-year-old son Frank were responsible for the attacks. That makes sense. A 69-year-old man in poor health and his son, who was 6 feet tall and weighed over 200 pounds, making him too large to fit through the panel chiseled away on the back door, came in and attacked them. Charles Cortimiglia vehemently denied his wife's claims, yet police nonetheless arrested the Giordanos and charged them both with murder. The men would later be found guilty. Frank was sentenced to hang, and his father to life in prison. Charles divorced his wife after the trial, and almost a year later, Rosie admitted that she falsely accused the Giordanos out of jealousy and spite, resulting in their release. Yeah, real dick move, Rosie. Now, what happens next in the story is not only weird, but to me, it is incredibly suspicious. One of the theories supporting the notion that Frank Doc Mumphrey was behind all of this, or at least took advantage of the situation, is that his struggling jazz business suddenly started doing incredibly well after a threatening letter, supposedly from the Axeman himself, was sent in and published in newspapers, saying that he would kill anyone who was not playing jazz music in a few days' time when he passed through the city. Let's take a look at this letter. Quote, "From hell." It's fucking lame. March 13th, 1919. Dear esteemed mortal, they have never caught me and they never will. They have never seen me, for I am invisible, even as the ether that surrounds your earth. I am not a human being, but a spirit and a demon from the hottest hell. I am what you Orleanians and your foolish police call the Axeman. When I see fit, I shall come and claim other victims. I alone know whom they shall be. I shall leave no clue except my bloody axe, besmeared with blood and brains of he whom I have sent below to keep me company. If you wish, you may tell the police to be careful not to rile me. Of course, I am a reasonable spirit. I take no offense at the way they have conducted their investigations in the past. In fact, they have been so utterly stupid as to only amuse me, but His Satanic Majesty, Francis Joseph. But tell them to beware. Let them not try to discover what I am. for it were better that they were never born than to incur the wrath of the Axeman. I don't think there is any need of such a warning, for I feel sure that the police will always dodge me, as they have in the past. They are wise and know how to keep away from all harm. Undoubtedly, you Orleanians think of me as a most horrible murderer, which I am, but I could be much worse if I wanted to. If I wished, I could pay a visit to your city every night. At will, I could slay thousands of your best citizens, for I am in close relationship with the Angel of Death. Now to be exact, at 12:15 earthly time on next Tuesday night, I'm going to pass over New Orleans. In my infinite mercy, I'm going to make a little proposition to you people. Here it is. I am very fond of jazz music, and I swear by all the devils in the nether regions that every person shall be spared in whose home a jazz band is in full swing at the time I have just mentioned. If everyone has a jazz band going, well, then so much the better for you people. One thing is certain, and that is that some of your people who do not jazz it out on that specific Tuesday night, if there be any, will get the axe. Well, as I am cold and crave the warmth of my native Tartarus, and it is about time I leave your earthly home, I will cease my discourse, hoping that thou wilt publish this, that it may go well with thee. I have been, am, and will be the worst spirit that ever existed, either in fact or realm of fantasy. Signed, the Axeman. Yeah, pretty cringe. But what wasn't cringe at least was that there were no murders that night, and all of the city's dance halls were filled to capacity, and professional and amateur bands played jazz at parties at hundreds of houses across town. Many of them playing a new composition by the well-known local composer Joseph Davila called The Mysterious Axeman's Jazz. But I guess people stopped jazzing it out on August 10th, 1919, because grocer Steve Boker was attacked as he slept in his bedroom by an axe-wielding intruder. Boker woke up during the night to find a dark figure looming over his bed. Upon regaining consciousness, Boker ran to the street to investigate the intrusion, and he found that his head had been cracked open. He then ran to the home of his neighbor, Frank Janissa, where he finally lost consciousness and collapsed. Once again, nothing was stolen from the home, and a panel on the back door had been chiseled away. Boker would recover from his injuries, but would never be able to remember any details of the attack. Then on the night of September 3rd, 1919, Sarah Laumann was attacked in her apartment, the second victim, who was neither Italian nor a grocer. After hearing the screams, neighbors came to check on the young woman, who lived alone, and they broke into her home when Laumann didn't answer the door. They discovered that the 19-year-old was lying unconscious on her bed, suffering from a severe head injury and missing several teeth. It was noted that the attacker came in through the window and not the back door of Laumann's house, leading some to believe that this was not the work of the real Axeman, but perhaps a copycat. But let's be real for a second. If the window's open, why bother chisel out a door panel? But even though it seemed out of his MO, a bloody axe was discovered on the front lawn of the building. Laumann would also recover from her injuries and also would not be able to recall any details from the attack. And now we go on to the final canonical victim, whose father you might remember from the beginning of the video for turning his attacker into a block of Swiss cheese by blasting him with a shotgun. Peter Pepitone's own son Michael, who followed in his father's footsteps of becoming a grocer as well. On the night of October 27th, 1919, Mike Pepitone's wife, known as Esther, was woken up by a noise and went to investigate. According to her official statements at the time, she got to the door of her husband's bedroom just as a large axe-wielding man was fleeing the scene. Mike Pepitone had been struck in the head and was covered in his own blood. Blood spatters covered the majority of the room, including a painting of the Virgin Mary. Esther was unable to describe any more characteristics of the killer other than large, and so Mike Pepitone's murder marked the end of the alleged Axeman attacks. As to what happens next, it's pretty tough to say for sure, but this is what I've been able to piece together. According to some researchers, after Mike Pepitone's murder, Esther is believed to get remarried to Angelo Albano. Yeah, the very same Angelo Albano who was reportedly in business with Joseph Monfrey, and she and Angelo moved out to Los Angeles. Then around October 1921, Angelo Albano suddenly disappears, and then 2 months later, on December 5th, 1921, Joseph Monfrey is shot to death by Esther Albano. And if we check Frank Doc Monfrey's obituary, he also died on the exact same day of December 5th, 1921, and he is described as a murder victim in an unsolved case. So the million-dollar question is, did this really happen? Is there any other circumstantial evidence suggesting that Frank Doc Mumphrey is Joseph Monfrey? And is there anything to suggest that Frank Doc Mumphrey moved down to LA in 1919? While some researchers claimed no evidence of a Monfrey being shot to death by an Esther Albano exists in either public or police records, according to Richard Warner, an author and researcher wrote a very long article in a privately published journal devoted to mafia history, claims that the police's chief suspect was not really known as Monfrey or even Mumphrey, but known as Joseph Manfrey. Esther was also apparently going by the name of Pasca at this point. So in Warner's opinion, this may explain why it's kinda difficult to find any reference to a man named Monfrey or a woman named Esther in Los Angeles newspapers at around about this time. However, this Joseph Manfrey really did indeed relocate from New Orleans to LA around 1919, exactly around the time the Axeman murders ended. And wouldn't you believe it, this man was known by another alias, the one and only Frank Doc Mumphrey. So historical records show that this Joseph Manfrey and his daughter moved to Los Angeles in 1919, and they started and operated a small drugstore in San Bernardino on 24th Street, while Angelo Albano moved to 36th Street, and you guys aren't going to believe it, but he opened a grocery. Reportedly, Joseph and Angelo also started and ran a real estate business together, but Angelo didn't like Manfrey's way of doing business, and he bought out Manfrey's share. Then one day in October 1921, Manfrey paid a visit to Angelo, and he was never seen again. Esther suspected that Manfrey killed Angelo, and she told the LAPD. However, they did what the LAPD do best in those days, and they didn't do a goddamn thing. And then 2 months later, on December 5th, 1921, Manfrey arrogantly came to Esther's house to confront her and demand money. When he attempted to assault her, she reached for a gun, and she shot him in the head, chest, and abdomen a total of 11 times, and Manfrey died instantly. After she killed Manfrey, she was arrested and taken in by the police. And this is where things start to get really strange. Esther explained her connection to Angelo Albano, telling authorities that she was previously married to a grocer by the name of Michael Pepitone in New Orleans. And in January 1921, Esther went to LA to attend her niece's wedding and apparently met Angelo Albano there. Angelo Albano had been previously married to his sister, but she had since passed away. And 4 months after meeting Esther, Angelo proposed to her, and they would eventually get married on September 12, 1921. However, after examining both Esther's marriage license and certificate, as well as her niece's, they would both reveal an entirely different truth. Esther's niece, Rose Albano, who was 17 at the time of her wedding, married a guy named Frank Cusimano, and she did not get married in January. She actually got married on September 7th, 1921, and Esther Pepitone married Angelo Albano using the name Pasca Pepitone on September 2nd, 1921. So she married Angelo almost a week before her niece's wedding. So the first question that comes to mind is, why in the hell did she lie about that, especially something that is so easy to verify? She then told police that she believed Joseph Manfrey had not only killed her second husband Angelo, but she claimed that this was the very same Joseph Manfrey that killed her first husband Mike Pepitone as well. She also told police that on the night of Mike Pepitone's murder, he was seen arguing with 2 Italian men outside their grocery. Then later that evening, at about 1:50 a.m., Esther woke up to those loud groans coming from Mike's bedroom. When she walked in, she found he was being beaten in the head with an 18-inch metal pipe, and not actually an axe. His head was beaten beyond recognition, and he died within hours. When interviewed at the time, she was unable to give any description of the killer other than large. However, she now claims that there were 2 killers fleeing the back of the room when she got to Mike's bedroom. So does that confirm the mafia theory? It makes sense, right? Almost all of the victims were of the same demographic. We also have various different descriptions of the killer. A witness gave the name of Mumphrey, and now we have more than one killer fleeing the room. Now here's something else as well. What makes Esther Albano's testimony even stranger is it bore an uncanny similarity to that of her mother 20 years earlier. In 1899, a feud with a neighbor led to him being murdered inside Esther's mother's home. Esther's mother immediately confessed to killing him, saying that he had been threatening the family and came to attack her while she was alone at night. But it turned out that the man had actually been lured to the home and shot execution style, and her husband and 2 other men were charged for the crime. Early on, the press portrayed her as a brave woman who stood up to the Black Hand, but Esther's version was even better than her mother's, and it was quickly picked up by the press both in LA and New Orleans. It allowed law enforcement to pronounce once again the end of Black Hand crimes and the end of the Axeman of New Orleans murder spree. However, Esther Albano pleaded self-defense, but she was sentenced to 10 years in prison for murder. But I'm still wondering why she felt the need to lie about her marriage dates. Either she knew more than she was letting on, or she discovered additional information later. So it begs the question, is this just some sort of divine comedy, marrying the man so closely connected to the very person she claimed killed her first husband? Or did she know who the killer was and planned her revenge against Joseph Manfrey? Or, even worse, was she working with Manfrey and shit turned sour? But I don't know, man. It seems like the Axeman is one of those stories where the more you dig, the weirder it gets. But what are your thoughts on the Axeman of New Orleans? Please feel free to post your theories in the comments, like the video, subscribe to the channel, and we'll see you again soon for another unsolved mystery. Thanks for watching. So the Bennington Triangle has just made my top 10 list of places never to visit. And while southwestern Vermont is known for its beauty and bucolic setting, 193 square kilometer area of thick woods is also the scene for one of America's greatest mysteries. Between 1945 and 1950.
Oh man. Out that.
Between May 9th. It allowed law enforcement to pronounce once again the end of Black Hand crimes and the end of the Axeman of New Orleans murder spree. However, Esther Albano pleaded self-defense, but she was sentenced to 10 years in prison for murder. But I'm still wondering why she felt the need to lie about her marriage dates. Either she knew more than she was letting on, or she discovered additional information later. So it begs the question, is this just some sort of divine comedy, marrying the man so closely connected to the very person she claimed killed her first husband? Or did she know who the killer was and planned her revenge against Joseph Manfrey? Or, even worse, was she working with Manfrey and shit turned sour? But I don't know, man. It seems like the Axeman is one of those stories where the more you dig, the weirder it gets. But what are your
Not fun that it happened, but you know, it was pretty good. Little break that we took there from all that stuff. Anyways, I hope you guys like this. I'll catch you guys in the next one. Make sure to leave a like and comment, and check out the Twitch and the Kick, and I'll see you guys in the next one.